Donald Trump's Epstein problems are continuing because of the treatment of the Trump DOJ of an Epstein conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. That's a big story we're covering, as well as new developments in Jack Smith, the only prosecutor to ever indict a president in the Justice Department, speaking out for the first time. I'm Ari Melber, MSNBC's anchor, chief legal correspondent, doing a breakdown here on YouTube. You can always subscribe here for my legal reporting. But starting with Epstein, what we have is Epstein back in the news for Donald Trump because of the ways that the Trump administration continues to coddle and hide details of this case. So the latest reporting from the Wall Street Journal is about how Maxwell was transferred from the normal facility where she was serving time for very serious sex trafficking related offenses to the Epstein case to what's basically a better prison. And inmates there are upset about it. They think she's getting unusually special treatment. That's from the reporting. And all of this goes back to how the Trump DOJ appears to be trying to help or reward her. Now, we don't know exactly why. The Trump administration certainly has not admitted or explained why, although again, she is in a prison facility that's different than the normal course and that only came after her interview where she made statements that tried to help or even to some degree exonerate Donald Trump, who has not been legally accused of wrongdoing in this case, important to point out. So this is one of those times where some people in the Trump side, and I talk to everybody, will say, oh, this keeps coming up because of their political opponents or because certain podcasters are interested in the case, or the media, they say. But in fact, why this is back in the news is that the Trump DOJ is helping coddle or give preferential treatment to the only person in federal prison serving time for an Epstein crime, the co-conspirator Maxwell. So that's a big development. The other thing that's coming or supposed to come is I just spoke with a Congressman Khanna, who's one of the many 200 plus members of Congress that are pushing to force this vote on releasing the Epstein files. And he says, and you may have heard about this, some other members of Congress have talked about it, that once they get this new member sworn in from the special election, they say they will have the 218 votes. Now, as with everything in Congress, you have to get to the vote. Right now, they say they have 217, and that would basically get them over the line for what's called a discharge petition. On the other hand, they're not there yet. So someone could change their vote. It could be that there are people who wanted to look like they were with this, but then aren't. Congressman Khanna also told me that he thinks if they do really get past the 218, many other members of the Republican caucus, he thinks will join them because they won't want to be on the other side of this, that they may have tried to help Trump by not going to force the release of the files. But if it gets to the point that it's passing, they'll join in. So that's something to watch there on whether we ever get more Epstein secrecy. The other big legal story that we're following, brand new, is former special counsel Jack Smith, who was the first and only prosecutor to ever indict a former president. You can't do a sitting president, but who famously indicted Donald Trump on two different cases, Jan 6 and the obstruction alleged around basically stealing classified documents, refusing to return them at Mar-a-Lago. He spoke out. I should mention this was with Andrew Weissman, who of course is a DOJ veteran, so they have that work history, and also an MSNBC analyst. So Smith is speaking out. We just reviewed what he said. It's really his first extended remarks since leaving that case. And he talked about the very by-the-book way they tried to do it. He addressed some of the criticism, or what sometimes we call, the backseat driving of people on the outside, whether they're former lawyers or media, about how he brought the case in Florida, for example, on documents where he got a lot of adverse rulings. And he said that's the by-the-book place to bring it because it was all activities that conduct that Donald Trump had taken in that area and after being president. So while there was a nexus back to the documents, whatever, the last day in office when he took them, that's why he brought it there, even if the judge there was ultimately tougher on him, Eileen Cannon, if you remember that. Smith also criticized the current Justice Department under Donald Trump for breaking the rules, basically, to try to do these so-called revenge prosecutions, which Donald Trump, of course, ordered basically in public, by accident partly, if you follow the news about what he meant to be a private message to Pam Bondi, but at other times he's admitted that he wants to go after these people. And so you had Smith criticizing that in the case, for example, of Comey, and going through some of the recent history that we've been living through where they couldn't get one prosecutor to do it, so they found another and ousted the U.S. attorney there in that Virginia district. So that was pretty striking. I also, as someone who follows the law and a lawyer myself, thought it was notable how if you listen to this, and the longer video is available, Jack Smith is breaking his silence, but he's completely dry, careful, no drama, no invective, certainly no big adjectives about anybody kind of a just the facts prosecutor, which is what you want in these cases. And he's prosecuted in the past prominent Democrats like John Edwards. He prosecuted Donald Trump famously here. So you kind of notice that. I think if you watch any of it, the clips or the whole thing, you kind of get that sense of him as a person. He obviously had to weigh breaking precedent, which is something lawyers are very careful about, in indicting a former president, but he thought the facts supported it, particularly in the case of what Donald Trump did to try to overthrow the 2020 election. That's known. Whether it was a federal crime was never, of course, brought to trial. And that's the other thing here. We heard Jack Smith, really for the first time, other than in filings, respond to the Supreme Court ruling. And he really did it like a G man, by saying that while he agreed more with the dissent than the majority opinion, you have to follow the law and the rule of law. And the Supreme Court had basically created a new defense that benefited Trump, this official acts thing. And I'm not going to rehash all that now. If you're watching this video, you probably remember when that happened. But now we have Smith responding and basically saying that A, he disagreed with the ruling, but of course you follow it. That B, he referred to how some of the justices said, well, if you allow this, what happens if other people looking at the indictment of a former president then say they want to play revenge or gotcha? And it was really interesting hearing Smith criticize that because what he's saying basically is that isn't a good reason not to follow the law, that if a high official commits a crime, you have to pursue it. He's done that in the case of Democrats and Republicans. So that was pretty striking. And then you compare that to something he didn't quite say, but I'll add in our reporting here, which is Donald Trump is now going after other people regardless. And he said he would do that just as he vowed to do it in 2016, said Clinton should be in jail. I recall covering that Supreme Court argument, which was divided and controversial. And I think it was Justice Alito, among others, who said, oh, well, what if it sets off a cycle of prosecutions? And so what Smith is saying is people doing bad things in response to upholding the law is not a reason to be psyched out or intimidated from upholding the law. And I think he has the credibility to stand on that. And then second, I think it's fair to observe that Justice Alito's concern was not exactly addressed or alleviated, because that concern, oh, we don't want revenge prosecutions, is what Alito said animated granting this immunity, which delayed and then ultimately extinguished the trial that Trump was going to have, former President Trump, as a defendant in that federal case. And now here we are, and well into the first year of the Trump administration, with 3 years to go, we are seeing so-called revenge prosecutions admitted by the very president who benefited from that ruling. It's not the most important reason to go back into the immunity case, but it certainly was interesting, notable that the very careful former special counsel Smith made that point. So that's some of the legal updates we're following. You can subscribe to get more of my videos. Ari Melber. Stay locked in.